Imagine a courtroom not of earth but of heaven itself. The air trembles with light, thrones stretch beyond sight, and in the center the Creator himself sits in silence, eyes burning with love and justice. Before him kneels an angel, radiant once, now dimmed, his wings frayed from the dust of rebellion. Every other angel who stood in his place has been cast away forever, but this one is different. This is Sariel, the only fallen angel in the history of eternity who God forgave. But why him? What did he do to earn a second chance when no one else ever could? And what does his story mean for you? Because if there is mercy for an angel, maybe there is hope for you too. Stay with me. This is a story that starts before the world was born, plunges into the darkness of rebellion, and rises into the most unexpected act of grace heaven has ever seen. This is Bible Stories Unveiled, and here we explore the parts of the Bible they never taught you in Sunday school. Make sure you like, subscribe, and click that bell icon so you never miss a journey into the deep waters of God's Word. Before the first sunrise painted the Garden of Eden in gold, before the sound of a single human heartbeat echoed in the world, there was the Council of the Watchers. They were not warriors like Michael. They were not messengers like Gabriel. They were guardians, observers, keepers of God's design. And among them was Sariel. He wasn't the largest or the loudest of the angels. His armor wasn't covered in battle scars, and his voice didn't boom like thunder. Instead, there was something about him that drew others close, a quiet depth in his eyes, as if he was always seeing something far beyond the horizon. Sariel had been given two great tasks. First, to oversee the movement of the moon, ensuring that time itself flowed as God intended. Second, to watch over the spirits of humanity, not their bodies, but the invisible eternal flame within them. It was a role that required patience. He had to stand at a distance, looking down on the newborn world, guarding without interfering, guiding without being seen. From heaven's edge, Sariel would often gaze down at the earth, studying the first humans. Adam and Eve walking hand in hand through a forest, bursting with life. Children splashing in streams, laughing without fear, men shaping the first tools from stone. He watched the seasons shift over their heads, the warmth of summer, the cool whisper of autumn, the hush of snow, and each time the moon completed its cycle, Sariel would mark it in his records, knowing that in God's perfect time, these people would grow in wisdom. But there was something else. When Sariel looked at humanity, he felt something not all angels could understand: compassion. He didn't just see them as part of the Creator's design. He saw their struggle, the way they sometimes stumbled into danger, the way sickness could strike without warning, the way hunger could make even the strongest man weak. Not all watchers felt the same way. Some looked down on humans with cold detachment. Others admired them too much. It started with small conversations among the watchers, quiet whispers in the courts of heaven. Why should we stand so far away? If we could walk among them, we could guide them directly. We have knowledge that could protect them. Why keep it hidden? Sariel tried to ignore the whispers at first. He knew the Creator's command. Do not cross the boundary between heaven and earth unless sent. It wasn't about pride or control. It was about timing. God's knowledge is like fire. In the right place it warms and gives life, but too soon, and it burns everything to the ground. One night, or what we would call night, though heaven has no darkness, Sariel stood watching a small human settlement far below. A child lay sick in her mother's arms, her breathing shallow. The woman's eyes glistened with tears as she whispered prayers into the sky. Sariel's chest ached. He knew the cure. The earth below them grew a plant whose leaves, when crushed and steeped, could heal the fever. It was simple, but it was forbidden. And for the first time, Sariel questioned the rule. It was not long after that the watchers gathered in secret on the summit of Mount Hermon, a place so high its peak seemed to brush the belly of heaven. There were 200 of them, their forms blazing in the starlight. Sariel stood among them as their leader. Shemhaza spoke. "Brothers," Shemhaza said, his voice rolling like distant thunder, "you have seen their pain. You have watched them struggle. We have the power to end it. But to do so, we must descend, not as spirits, but as men. There was a murmur of agreement. Some hesitated. They knew the cost, but Shemihaza pressed on. If we all do it, there will be no turning back. Let us swear an oath together. If one falls, we all fall. We will share in the consequences, whatever they may be. Sariel's heart pounded. He thought of the child. He thought of the farmers who struggled to read the seasons. He thought of the mothers who feared the unknown. And when the oath was made, Sariel did not walk away. That night, they fell from the heavens like a rain of living stars. The humans, startled by the sight, came running to the mountaintop where the watchers now stood in forms that looked like men, but with eyes that burned like the heart of a flame. The people did not fear them. They reached out in awe. Sariel knelt among them, touching the soil, breathing the scent of earth for the first time. He taught them to track the moon's movement, to know when to plant and when to harvest. He taught the women how to mix certain leaves into teas that could heal fevers and calm pain. In the evenings, he would sit by their fires, telling them the stories of the stars. But not all that was given was good. Some watchers shared weapons of war. Others taught dark arts that twisted the human spirit. The more knowledge poured out, the more humanity's innocence began to fade. One night, as Sariel looked at the people he loved, he saw something that chilled him. Two men fighting with blades forged from metal the watchers had revealed. Blood stained the ground. The killer's eyes were filled not with sorrow, but with pride. It was then Sariel felt the first sting of guilt. He had wanted to help, but had they just opened the door to destruction? The voice came like a wind through his bones, not heard with ears, but with the soul. Sariel, he knew instantly it was the Creator. What have you done? The weight of the question crushed him, and for the first time in his eternal life, Sariel felt fear. The night the summons came, the sky above Mount Hermon cracked like glass. The humans below felt it before they saw it. The wind died. The birds fell silent. Even the insects hid. The air was charged heavy, as if all creation had drawn in a single breath and refused to exhale. Then the light came. It wasn't the soft glow of sunrise or the silver wash of moonlight Sariel loved. This was a light that pierced bone and soul, the radiance of heaven descending in judgment. The watchers were seized not by human hands but by forces no mortal could see. Angels of fire and wind, unfallen and unshaken, sent to bring the rebels home. Sariel did not resist. Some of his brothers fought, their faces twisted with rage and disbelief. Others cursed the messengers, screaming that their actions had been noble, that God was unjust to punish them. Sariel just lowered his head. The faces of the humans he had taught flashed before his mind. The healed child, the grateful families, the farmers who could now feed their villages, and then the bloodshed he had witnessed. Had he given them life, or had he given them the means to destroy it? They were brought to the throne room, the place no angel enters unless summoned. Imagine a space so vast that stars burn in the distance like torches along its walls, a floor of glass reflecting the infinite light above, and at the center, the throne, the seat of the Creator, where justice and mercy meet. Michael stood at one side, Gabriel at the other, their expressions unreadable. The watchers knelt, some defiantly, some trembling. Sariel simply closed his eyes. The Creator's voice was not like the wind this time. It was not like thunder. It was everything. You were given a place among the holy. You were trusted to watch over my children. And yet you descended. You defied. You corrupted. A murmur of protest rose from the crowd of fallen. Silence. The word wasn't shouted. It simply was. And the room obeyed. The judgment was swift. Every watcher who descended was to be bound in chains beneath the mountains in a place where no light would ever reach until the day of judgment. There would be no appeal, no second chance, no redemption. One by one, angels of fire stepped forward, wrapping chains of light around the rebels' arms and wings. The chains didn't just bind their bodies. They burned into their spirits, cutting them off from the song of heaven. Sariel felt it. The sudden emptiness, like someone had ripped out the center of who he was. The connection to God, the constant hum of divine presence that every angel feels, was gone. It was in that silence that Sariel understood what hell truly is. Here is where Sariel's story begins to diverge from the others. Many of the watchers spat curses as they were dragged away. Others plotted vengeance, their minds already twisted with pride. But Sariel began to weep, not out of fear for himself, but because he realized the damage he had done. He remembered the child he had healed. He remembered the men who had forged weapons from the knowledge given. And he whispered almost too quietly for the court to hear, "Lord, I am sorry." No angel had ever said those words from that place before. They were taken to the deep places of the earth, far below the mountains where they had first descended. The air was cold, the darkness absolute. For others, the chains were the end. They fell into bitterness, their spirits twisting into something almost unrecognizable. For Sariel, the chains became a crucible. In the silence, with nothing left but his own thoughts, he began to pray, not for release, not for his old glory, but for forgiveness. He prayed for the humans he had taught, that they would use what was good and reject what was evil. He prayed for the watchers who mocked him, that somehow they too would see the truth. And most of all, he prayed that if God ever gave him the smallest chance to serve again, he would take it, even if it meant no one would ever remember his name. Time passed in the prison of the watchers. Not days, not years. Time in that place was different. The others counted their days in bitterness. Sariel counted his in prayer. He had no light, no sky, no moon to track. The very role God had given him to mark the movement of time had been stripped away. All that remained was the steady rhythm of his own spirit bending low in repentance. One moment, if you can even call it a moment, in that timeless place, Sariel felt something he hadn't felt since the courtroom, a presence. It was faint at first, like the smell of rain before a storm, or the distant warmth of a fire you can't yet see. And then he heard it, Sariel. His eyes flew open. He thought it was a memory, some echo of the past. But the voice came again, not as the crushing judgment it once was, but softer, almost gentle. "Sariel, rise." In the darkness, the chains that bound him began to hum with a strange light, not the blinding fire of judgment, but a soft gold glow, warm, alive. The others stared in disbelief. "What is this?" one of them hissed. "Why him?" another growled. The glow grew brighter, and for the first time in an age, Sariel felt the pull of heaven calling him upward. He didn't know why. He didn't dare to ask. He simply whispered, "Thank you." And then he was gone from the pit. Sariel stood once again in the court of heaven. It felt different now. Before he had walked in as one who belonged there, confident, clothed in glory. Now he stood as one who had been stripped bare, humbled and utterly dependent on the mercy of the one before him. The Creator's voice filled the space. "Sariel, do you know why you are here?" Sariel bowed so low his forehead touched the glass-like floor. "No, Lord, only that you have called and I am here. I have seen your heart in the darkness. You grieved not for your place, but for your sin. You sought not your own glory, but my mercy." There was a pause, the kind of pause that feels like the whole universe is leaning in to listen. "Rise, Sariel. Your chains are broken. I am sending you again." Sariel trembled. "Lord, am I worthy?" "No," the Creator said plainly, "but my mercy makes you so." He was given a new role, no longer a watcher in the same sense as before, no longer one to reveal the deep mysteries of heaven prematurely. Now Sariel would serve as a guide to human souls, a healer to the wounded, a guardian to those walking in the shadows of death. Some traditions say this was the moment Sariel became an angel of healing, working alongside Raphael. Others say he became a guardian of the moon once more, but this time not to reveal forbidden secrets, only to keep the rhythm of God's creation in order. But whatever the title, one truth stood above them all. Sariel was the first and only fallen angel to be restored. Word spread through the hosts of heaven like wildfire. Some rejoiced. Angels who had once loved Sariel celebrated his return. Others struggled to understand. Why him? Why not the others? Does this mean any fallen angel could return? Michael, ever the commander, answered plainly, "No, mercy is given to those who repent." And only Sariel repented. When Sariel's eyes opened again, It was not to the blinding light of heaven, but to the soft glow of moonlight over a quiet valley. The air was cool, carrying the scent of cedar and wildflowers. The sound of a stream whispered nearby. Somewhere in the distance, a shepherd sang to his flock. For a moment, Sariel simply stood still, letting the world breathe around him. He had been gone from Earth for what felt like an eternity, but it was as though he could still hear the echo of the chains that once bound him. The last time Sariel had walked the earth, he had descended like a star falling from the sky. Brilliant, awe-inspiring, terrifying in his majesty. This time it was different. There was no blaze of glory, no throng of humans rushing to see the man from the heavens. He appeared quietly unseen, like a shadow that only the spiritually awake might notice. It was intentional. This was not a mission to be noticed. It was a mission to serve. Not far from the valley, Sariel found a small village. The people were weary, their clothes threadbare, their eyes heavy with hunger and worry. Near the edge of the village, he saw a boy lying in the dirt. His skin was pale, his breath shallow. A woman knelt beside him, trying desperately to feed him water from a cracked clay cup. Sariel knelt down opposite her. She didn't know who he was. She only saw a stranger with kind eyes. He asked, "What happened to your son?" The woman's voice trembled. "The fever came 3 days ago. I've prayed for healing, but the herbs I once knew how to use, they've been forgotten." Sariel's chest tightened. It was his fault that humanity had once learned too much too soon, and now in fear had thrown away even the good knowledge. But this time, he didn't reveal forbidden secrets. Instead, he knelt and prayed. His hand rested on the boy's forehead, and with a whisper that only heaven could hear, he called upon the Creator's mercy. Moments later, the boy's breathing deepened. Color returned to his cheeks. The mother's eyes filled with tears as she pulled him close. "Who are you?" she asked. Sariel smiled faintly. "A friend, nothing more." And before she could thank him, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd. This became his way. Sariel walked the earth, moving from village to village. He tended the sick. He guided the lost. He whispered words of courage into the hearts of those who had given up hope. Sometimes he worked through dreams, planting visions in the minds of those who needed guidance. Sometimes he simply walked beside the lonely, unseen, until they found their way home. One night, Sariel stood alone in a field, looking up at the moon. It was full and bright, casting silver light across the land. The moon had been his first assignment, the great timekeeper of the heavens. Now, as he gazed at it, he realized it had become something more, a reminder. The moon doesn't shine with its own light. It reflects the light of the sun. And Sariel knew that was him now. He had no light of his own anymore, only what the Creator allowed to shine through him. It was in that field that he heard a voice, deep, familiar, and cold. "You don't belong here." Sariel turned to see one of the watchers, still bound in bitterness, yet roaming in spirit to tempt and corrupt. His chains were spiritual now, unseen, but they still held. The fallen one sneered. "Do you think your service makes you one of them again? You're still one of us, Sariel. You broke the law. You fell." Sariel's voice was calm. "Yes, I fell, but I asked for mercy, and he gave it." The other angel spat in the dust. "Mercy is weakness." Sariel stepped closer. "Number mercy is strength you'll never understand." And with that, the figure vanished into the darkness, unable to stand in the presence of the light Sariel now carried. Sariel's work on earth had stretched across generations. He had walked through deserts with nomads, sat in the corners of bustling marketplaces, and stood in silent forests, listening to the prayers of the lonely. But one night, under the silver light of the moon, the voice came again. Sariel, it had been years, maybe centuries, since he had heard it so clearly. His heart stirred. He fell to his knees. "Your time here is almost done. But before you return to me, there is one last thing you must do." Far to the north, in a land blanketed in winter, there was a village that had turned completely from the ways of God. They no longer prayed, no longer showed kindness to one another. Violence and mistrust filled their days, but in that village lived one girl, a child of 8, whose heart still quietly whispered to the Creator. Her parents were gone. She was cared for by strangers who only saw her as another mouth to feed. But still, every night she spoke to heaven before she slept. The mission was simple in words, but not in weight. Protect her, guide her, and bring her faith into the light. Sariel traveled north unseen, his steps silent over the snow. The wind howled across the icy hills, but he felt no cold. His focus was on the single flicker of faith he could sense. The girl's prayers faint but steady like a candle fighting the darkness. When he reached the village, he saw the truth. Harsh faces, empty eyes, doors slammed against strangers. No laughter, no music. The girl was there in a small wooden hut, kneeling beside her bed. Her voice was barely a whisper. God, if you hear me, please send someone. Sariel couldn't appear in shining glory. That would frighten them. Instead, he took the form of a quiet traveler. He began to help the villagers in small ways, repairing a broken roof, carrying water from the frozen river, leaving firewood at doorsteps during the night. For the girl, he became a friend. He told her stories not directly from heaven, but woven with truths about love, forgiveness, and courage. He taught her kindness not as a rule, but as a way of life. Slowly, her faith grew stronger, and something unexpected began to happen. Her light spread. A neighbor helped her in return. Then another, a smile here, a shared meal there. Like ice breaking in spring, the village began to thaw. One night, disaster struck. A fire broke out in one of the huts. The wind caught it, and soon the whole village was in danger. The girl was trapped inside. Sariel moved faster than thought. He pushed through the flames, found her huddled in a corner, and shielded her with his own body as he carried her out. She coughed and gasped, clinging to him. When they reached the snow outside, she looked up at him, and for a moment she saw through the disguise. Her eyes widened. You're an angel. Sariel smiled softly. No, I'm just someone God forgave. And before she could speak again, he vanished into the night. The voice came once more, stronger now. It is finished. Sariel felt the pull. Not the downward drag of chains, but the upward draw of home. When he opened his eyes again, he stood before the throne. But this time, there was no fear. The Creator spoke. Well done, Sariel. You were faithful in small things. You guarded not with power, but with love, and so your place is secure. The halls of heaven filled with light as Sariel took his place among the redeemed. Not because he had never fallen, but because he had been lifted up by mercy. Sariel's story isn't just about an angel. It's about you. It's about me. We've all crossed lines we shouldn't have. We've all stood in places we didn't belong. But Sariel's life tells us something the enemy never wants us to believe, that it's not too late to turn back. He is the proof that God's mercy can reach even the furthest fall. And if there is hope for an angel, there is hope for you. Thank you for joining me for this journey into one of heaven's most extraordinary redemption stories. If you felt this message stir something in your heart, don't let it end here. Carry it with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late. And remember, then this is Bible Stories Unveiled, where we uncover the stories most people have never heard, but that can change everything. If you haven't already, hit like, subscribe, and click that bell so you never miss what's coming next. Until next time, stay curious, stay hopeful, and keep your eyes on the end.